The spreadsheet that no one was supposed to know anything about. The secret that no one was supposed to hear. And the facade that no one was supposed to figure out. Forget about what all the political talking heads have told us about the recent books written on the 2024 election and all the behind the scenes. They said, well, there's nothing new. They don't tell us anything that we don't already know. Listen, I've read all 3 books cover to cover. They do give us some new information about what was going on behind the scenes. Some of these revelations are going to shock you like they did me. I'm even going to point out the time that I literally froze with what I just read and reread it in disbelief. It was perhaps to me the most shocking quote in all 3 of these books. And I'm going to obviously point out what I believe to be the blatant disregard for visibility and transparency. Are you ready to get in and learn some new things? Let's do it. The spreadsheet that no one was supposed to know anything about. Vice President Harris's office planned for the very real possibility that Joe Biden might die in office. You know, after all, Biden was the oldest man elected president at 78 years and 2 months. Jamal Simmons, who was the communication director for Vice President Harris, put together a spreadsheet. It's referred to as the death roll roster. And it's with the idea that if Biden died suddenly, Simmons had this fear that the Republicans would find a way to thwart Harris from taking the oath of office. And he based this upon how Republicans had acted during January the 6th. The White House didn't know about this spreadsheet. In fact, Vice President Harris didn't even know about the spreadsheet. And so this spreadsheet had the names of federal judges all across the country and what cities they resided in, and they focused on all of the Republican-appointed federal judges, and they excluded any that Trump had appointed when he had been president previously. But this spreadsheet traveled everywhere with the vice president. And so if Biden suddenly died, Jamal would take that spreadsheet, and he believed it would allow them to allow Vice President Harris to have a LBJ-like moment. Remember, LBJ, following the assassination of JFK, was sworn in by a local federal judge they found there in Texas, sworn in there on Air Force One, and then later spoke before the press. But the idea was, if Simmons believed that if a federal judge, a Republican appointed federal judge, gave her the oath of office, well, right off the bat, that would give Harris legitimacy. You know, until I read these books, I did not know about the extraordinary efforts that the White House communications team took to compensate for President Biden's cognitive decline. Now, of course, you and I both knew Biden was freezing up on speeches.
Thanks to all the members of Congress and Homeland Security Secretary. I'm not sure I'm going to introduce you all the way.
He had those long pauses. He was forgetting names. He was losing his train of thought. But we did know that the White House communications team deliberately started shortening his speeches, shortening his sentences, his paragraphs, because Biden wasn't reading fluently. And it had nothing to do with his stuttering problem from the past. You know, we didn't know about the Hollywood coaching that Biden was getting behind the scenes from Steven Spielberg, from Jeffrey Katzenberg, where they were trying to coach Biden on his speaking delivery, his cadence, his pacing, his vocal inflection, his vocal projection. And of course, we knew that that was really not making much of a difference. You know, we did know that Biden had the fewest press conferences of any U.S. president in the modern era in a 4-year period. And we watched as Biden handled these press conferences where he moved down a list of reporters that his staff had given him for people to choose, to call on. And Biden wasn't even good about hiding the fact that he was told to do that. We knew that there were times that after these speeches that he didn't remember what to do. He looked confused. He looked frozen. Then there was the time that he turned and he shook no one's hand. In fact, it even caught the attention of Saturday Night Live. But then we started noticing these note cards at these press events that the president was holding. And they were not only giving him the bullet points or the talking points, which is normal, but they were telling him when to move, where to sit, when to stand, where to turn. Something that we had never seen before. You know, Ron Klain, who had been President Biden's former chief of staff, was called in for debate prep. And he had been away from the White House for some time, but he was shocked at how out of touch with American politics that Biden was. And Biden did not know really about the current events of the day and the things that were going on, and he seemed clueless of the things that Trump was saying out there on the campaign trail, things that you would typically watch the news or you would be up on and know if you're running for president. What we didn't know was that the White House started putting together for President Biden these news cards when he would go to some of these events. And these news cards would list the current events, the things going on during the day at that time, and the prepared responses that Biden could turn around and give. Then there was the facade that no one was supposed to figure out. Now, we knew that Biden had the fewest cabinet meetings of any president in 4 years, in recent years. He only had like 8 in 4 years. But we did know that these cabinet meetings were nothing more than performance. Cabinet secretaries were told, from reading these books, were asked to submit questions and the talking points and the things they wanted to bring up at the cabinet meeting. And then the White House took that information and gave President Biden, during the cabinet meeting, these note cards with the cabinet secretary's questions or statements or discussion points. And Biden also had his prepared remarks provided by his staff. And there were 3 cabinet secretaries that were listed in the book Original Sin who said these cabinet meetings were terrible and at times they felt uncomfortable. And you know, what was meant to look like an impromptu meeting, they weren't. They were completely staged. The secret that no one was supposed to hear. White House officials, to my shock, had internal discussions about putting Biden in a wheelchair. You know, they had talked about the different falls they had had, and if he had another really bad fall, they felt like they would have no other choice but to do that. But their reluctance and what they knew to be the truth was that they couldn't put him in a wheelchair until after the election, after he got reelected, because the optics would look bad. One of the most shocking quotes out of all these books that I came across, and when I read it, I literally had to stop and reread it again because I couldn't believe what I just read and what came out of the mouth of one of the aides that worked in the Biden White House when he was asked about covering up and justifying for covering up what they did and covering up Biden's physical and cognitive issues. Here's what he said. He said, he just had to win. He's talking about Biden. He just had to win, and then he could disappear for 4 years. He'd only have to show proof of life every once in a while. And then he went on to say that when you vote for somebody, you're voting for the people around them too. And basically what they're saying is, it doesn't really matter. We had things under control behind the scenes, and that's all that really matters. And I think out of all of the lessons we could learn from the election of 2024, David Plouffe says it best. And David Plouffe was President Obama's campaign manager, and also he served as the campaign strategist, senior strategist for the Harris campaign. And this is what he said. He said, one of the great lessons of 2024, never again can we as a party suggest to people that what they are seeing is not true. And I think that is so true. You know, I'm really interested in what you think. What are your thoughts about the cover-up of President Biden and the cover-up of his physical and cognitive abilities and some of these new revelations? I really would be interested in what you think. Drop your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. Hey, if you think you got some value from what you watched today, give us a thumbs up. And please do us a favor, share our link with some of your friends and family. And for sure, if you haven't subscribed to our Pres Politics channel yet, Take a second and do that right now.